in order for one person to surrender sexually in an intimate moment or even just in a casual moment just with your partner, one person has to be holding the spine so that I can surrender. And in this practice, it's surrendering into that feminine pulse. And the deeper your partner has cultivated their capacity to remain present and their own depth of awareness, the greater your surrender can be.
What is that power? And maybe even how did you find it in yourself to really surrender?
You can only really empoweredly surrender when you have yourself to fall back on, when you have your relationship with God to fall back on. And if something falls through, I have my own spine, I have myself. And it's a cultivated inner sense that actually enables us to surrender deeper.
How do you take someone who's showing up with that level of tension and invite them to feel feminine during sex and to surrender during sex?
Well, I would definitely encourage us.
Hi, and welcome to This Tantric Life. I'm Layla Martin, and in this conversation, me and Nina Lombardo, who is a specialist in conscious intimacy, polarity, and sacred union, deep dive into what is surrender. How do you actually surrender in sex, in relationship, and in life? And how do you get what you really crave in your partnership? How do you turn each other on and keep the eros alive? And what is it that many people misunderstand about things like femininity or sexual submission? And what are these things really, so that we can use them to be more in our power, more in our eros, and have the most exquisite sexuality? So I invited Nina onto the podcast because her Instagram really moves me. It's one of the most exquisite, poetic examinations of polarity dynamics and what it means to surrender as a woman that I've ever come across. So I wanted to bring her on here today to share her very special wisdom with you. She's a teacher and mentor for women and couples, and she specifically supports them to embody their deepest spiritual sexual expression, allowing them to experience the union that they crave with life, their lovers, and the divine. Welcome, Nina.
Thank you.
So something that I'd love to kick us off with is, what is the feminine and what do people get wrong about it? Like when people are out there being like feminine this and feminine that, what is it that they misunderstand and what is it really?
Well, I'll offer my interpretation, which is all I can do. So what people don't often grok when I'm talking about the feminine is that I'm not talking about femininity, which is more of a superficial quality that we see in the world, right? We associate femininity with dazzly, colorful, sensual in the body. It's more of a surface thing, right? That I am feminine. So I wear jewelry and I do my hair and I like makeup. Like that's feminine, right?
And it's very different based on your culture too.
Yes, absolutely. And I'd say that that's a superficial version or aspect of the feminine that I teach. It's not the feminine. It is. It's just how she manifests superficially. And when I talk about the feminine, it's really an experience. Well, it is the experience, right? So everything that we can experience, that we can taste and touch and smell and live and think and embody, all of this is her, right? So we can just by simply tuning into your bodily experience, what you're feeling right now, your emotional experience, the tones and textures of your body, of your breath, all of that is the feminine. And when we really relax into this present moment experience, it feels like love. So I often equate the feminine with this feeling of love, of fullness in the body. And so that is her on her deepest level. And when we tap into that current of love in the self and our deep inner channel, we tend to move that light through our body. We tend to express that fullness through our body. So it looks more like movement and we want to express it through like the dazzlingness of our superficial appearance. So that's why I'm saying that what we equate as femininity in our society is perhaps related and often is to that deep current of love that we feel within the self.
I feel, I mean, something that comes to me is I feel like there is this love of putting on makeup and getting dressed up and doing hair,
Mhm.
but that many of us learn to do it in order to attract a mate, right?
Right.
Like I am doing this so that someone finds me hot and like
Right.
marries me, which actually there's no shame in that because we live
Mhm.
in a society that teaches
Mhm.
us that. And also like we don't want a, hot partner. And so like looking your best doesn't hurt in
Yeah.
that. But I feel like the reason that a lot of us can push away from some of that. I know the reason I pushed away from that was I was like, I don't want to get dressed every morning in the hope that someone chooses me. And so,
Absolutely.
what was so beautiful for me in terms of adorning myself as the feminine
Mhm.
was starting to feel exactly what you're talking about. How do I do my makeup when life is pulsating through me? Like,
Exactly.
how do I want to get dressed today when life is pulsating through me?
Mm.
And of course, an aspect of that is magnetism and attractiveness and
Mhm.
feeling that I get to light up my partner's eyes when I walk
Yeah.
into the room. But that wasn't the only reason
Yeah.
why I chose to wear that outfit.
Right. And that reminds me of my own journey a little bit because I went through a period where, there's a cultural expectation of be feminine so that you can be attractive to a mate. And there can be a lot of resentment that comes in that because our femininity isn't connected to something inside of us. It's connected to how we're being perceived externally. And that can lead to a feeling of emptiness and anxiety, like we're just trying to get this attention all the time. And that isn't healthy. So a lot of women go through their own natural evolution, myself included, where I rejected all of that, where I shaved my head and stopped wearing makeup and was just like, fuck this. I went through that period in my early 20s to come home to my own wholeness. Who am I without those external expectations? Um, and then and then in that journey, I started to just embrace the fact that I am just a very feminine being. Like I love just expressing my inner light and being recognized for that. So
Yeah.
it's not coming from this sense now of I need you to recognize my light. It's just I am light and I want to live that through my body. I want to live that through my sexuality. I want to live that through my adornment and the way that I beautify myself, right? So it's really coming from the inside out rather than the outside in.
Yeah, totally. I actually had a very similar journey because I grew up in a lot of places, but some of them, the names give it away. Peachtree City, Georgia, Highlands Ranch, Colorado. And it was like dye your hair blonde, be as thin as possible, be a cheerleader. Like this is the recipe. And
Mhm.
so I wore soccer shorts to school and like the same like free t-shirt that I'd gotten from Goodwill for like an entire year as a
Mhm.
rebellion. Did the same thing as you, shaved my head when I was both 15 and 19
Mhm.
throughout all my makeup when I was 19. And part of that almost was like going back to zero.
Yes.
Like, like I just got to like reset this, go back to zero
Mhm.
and see what I am without all of this
Right.
because it feels like it was given to me and I want to
Mhm.
know who I am without it.
Exactly.
And that really spoke to me in terms of a ritual that I did a long time ago at a tantra school. And they always had us get super dressed up, like the women, makeup and Shakti clothing and like all kinds of
Mhm.
adornments. And I remember a woman being like, I wonder what it would be like to do this ritual with no makeup and a brown robe. And so
Mm.
I feel like there's this
Mhm.
beauty of connecting to that feminine essence
Mhm.
before any of the bells and whistles
Right.
and knowing what that feels like in and through your body.
Yeah.
And I feel like I feel like so many of us too, whether we've ever articulated it or not, it's like that feminine, that's a universal capacity to be in love with all that is.
Mm.
That's a spiritual state.
Mm.
And the fact that I got taught that I had to trade that I had to like put that on as an adornment and trade it so that I
Right.
could feel worthy or have
Mhm.
protection, like everything got flipped and so wonky.
Mhm.
And part of the reclamation of all of that is like, of course, I want to feel sexy and attractive and beautiful in my body.
Yeah.
But the most important thing is this connection to life force energy itself.
That's the only thing that's constant
Yeah.
because everything else is going to change. I mean, we're going our superficial surface body and appearance is going to change. It's going to fade. Our surface radiance fades as we age, but our inner radiance magnifies.
Totally.
And as long as we have connection with that, we're unstoppable.
Totally. And then after 20 years of being a brunette, I dyed my hair blonde and lost some weight. And I was like, maybe it just gets you in the end. Also, I have finally allowed myself, because I held such a staunch, like, I will not color my hair.
Right.
But
Same.
I was like, what do I actually want to do? Like,
Yeah.
what feels like the most playful thing? And I think that's the gift of fully claiming that connection to life force energy. Because I think so much of feminism and so much of being a woman is like, what's the right thing to do? And the coolest thing is you get this level of liberation that I think so many women are hungry for, when you're like, I source my decisions from that pulsating life within me.
Yeah.
And I do that. And then how can you be wrong?
Exactly.
All right, we're going to pause for just a moment, and I'm going to invite you to join my email list. You might be like, email, but honestly, email is where I share my deepest teachings, my most personal stories, and my most outrageously good content. It's also where you can stay connected to all of the podcasts that I release and my programs where you can train more deeply with me. So if you want to join, head over to laylamartin.com and sign up with your best email address. So let's talk about surrender. So you write so poetically on this topic. So once again, what do people misunderstand about surrender, and what is it according to you?
What is surrender? I'd say surrender is simply a full embrace and acceptance of what is. And I'm not quite sure what people get wrong about it. Maybe that'll reveal itself as I continue on. I'm sure people get a lot wrong about it. Okay, maybe this. People are trying to force surrender, right? There's like this, okay, I have to surrender. But they're also ignoring and suppressing and rejecting a lot of what is here. Like they're like, I want to surrender to the good feelings and I want to feel amazing. But at the same time, they're rejecting a really ugly, uncomfortable part of their experience that really needs to be breathed into, that needs to be open to. And when we do that, that is where we experience the deepest surrender.
I feel like surrender is a trust. It's like, I trust my body, or I trust the moment, or I trust what's happening in the universe. And I feel like what I've seen, I know for me, like at first when I tried to surrender, I was like, no, but fuck this. Like, I've got a bunch of trauma in my body. Is anyone paying attention? This universe is fucked. Like, there's so many problems with the world. Like, why would I surrender? Like, what is that? So I think what's interesting is that when we try and force our minds to surrender, it's like our minds will go to war with us. Because there is a part of our mind, and rightfully so, that's like, no, I want it to be better, or no, the world should be more peaceful or loving or whatever it is. And that space of surrender, it's like, it's underneath all of that. So it's hard to fully talk about it. It's like something that you can find if you go deep enough, like underneath, like the ice of the mind. There's like this luscious, heated ocean under there.
Yeah, it's easy to surrender when things are going well. Or easier, let's say, when life is perfect and the sun's out and I have everything I need. But we're really tested into our practice when things aren't going the way we want. And that really is the ultimate practice.
Yeah. Or even I got really good, I'd say fairly recently, but over the course of my life, right? Because I had so much pain and so much just like struggle and trauma. So I got really good at surrendering to painful, hard things. I was like, this is the worst thing ever. Like, my heart's shattered and everything's horrible. And I was like, I could find the trust of the universe in that. And then as soon as stuff got really good, I would started catching myself white knuckling it, because there was this sense of, what if I lose it? Or what if I fuck it all up? Or, and so then part of my process started to be like, can I let it be this good? Like,
Yeah.
can I actually surrender into it being this good, knowing that everything changes? And part of
Yes.
my surrender into the painful things was knowing that everything was always changing.
Mhm.
And so finding this sweet surrender of the goodness as well,
Mhm.
knowing that it'll only be here for
Yeah.
a moment.
That really is it. Just holding that, knowing that, wow, this is here. I'm opening to it and it's going to change.
Yeah,
That's the only thing we know about life is that it's going to change.
totally. And I'd be interested to hear your perspective on this, but I feel like something that people really misunderstand about surrender is that they confuse it with a form of submission.
Mm.
And I don't mean
Mhm.
like the really sexy BDSM submission, which
Mhm.
we might be able to talk about, or
Mhm.
just like sexual submission,
Mhm.
but the submission that women were forced into for a few
Mm.
thousand years of
Yeah.
like, you don't get to make choices.
Mhm.
And so therefore you must just surrender to what's happening, right? So I think there's a real association
Mhm.
with a weakness or a
Yeah.
force.
Mhm.
And something that I've loved that I've felt in your teachings is it requires a kind of power to really
Mm.
surrender.
Mhm.
So I'd love to hear from
Mhm.
you. What is that power? And maybe even how did you find it in yourself
Yeah.
to really surrender?
Mm. Well, it's that journey of coming into inner wholeness and trusting the self that I can open to life and I could open to a man. That's a whole nother topic where people get kind of triggered around surrendering to a man, where they equate surrender with like giving up your power and submission. But you can only really empoweredly surrender when you have yourself to fall back on, when you have your relationship with God to fall back on. It's like I surrender to this current of whatever's happening, or I surrender to my man's leadership. And if something falls through, I have my own spine. I have my own heart. I have myself. And it's a cultivated inner sense that actually enables us to surrender deeper.
Mm, mm.
Mhm.
So let's talk about that then. Like, what does surrender look like in relationship with a man?
Mhm. Well, then we'll start getting into the polarity conversation
Great.
a little bit. Because I'd say surrender in a polarized intimate dynamic, we are in order for one person to surrender sexually in an intimate moment or even just in a casual moment just with your partner, one person has to be holding the the spine,
Mm,
right? Holding the structure, holding the container so that I can surrender. And in this practice, it's surrendering into that feminine pulse, surrendering into my energetic experience. And we can really safely do that in an intimate practice when our partner's holding it. It's like with their presence, with their depth, with their awareness. Like, I am the container for your experience to just unravel and to reveal itself as deeply as it can. And the deeper your partner has cultivated their capacity to remain present and their own depth of awareness, the greater your surrender can be.
mm.
Mhm.
And the idea is that you cultivate that intentionally
Yes.
in a heterosexual romantic partnership,
Mhm.
or you can play with this polarity in same sex partnerships,
Mhm.
that you cultivate that because that creates eros.
Yes. And it happens spontaneously too.
Yeah.
I mean, this is kind of the nature of sexuality, right?
Mm.
And attraction. There's one person kind of witnessing and experiencing someone, and then there's the person who's being experienced, and there's a charge in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that's something that a lot of women have woken up to is
Mhm.
that some of the modes that I appreciate having, right? Like I have a real like get it done mode.
Yeah.
Like and like I have a real like bulldozer mode and I
Mhm.
have a real like like shit is happening mode.
Mhm.
I love those parts of me. Like I would never give those up.
Mhm.
And those are not where my deepest sexual pleasure comes from.
Right.
Like when I'm in that mode, I'm not necessarily like, oh, I want to have 12 orgasms right now. I think this is something that gets missed is if I repressed that mode
Mhm.
because I thought that was too masculine
Mm.
out of some misguided idea that I have to be feminine all the
Definitely.
time.
Mhm.
I also wouldn't want 12 orgasms because what repressing oneself is never actually the path to
Right.
eros. But if I only inhabit that mode, And I inhabit that mode at the expense of my partner
Yeah.
being able to ever inhabit that mode. It's like I lose connection with some of my turn on, with some of my erotic nature. And I loved, me and Emily were talking to one of our friends the other day, and she was like, my partner is being so soft and he's lost his spine. And Emily was like, have you considered getting even softer? Like, have you considered becoming so
Right.
soft that like he actually finds his spine in
Exactly.
response, as opposed to maybe like criticizing him and telling him what he
Right.
should do?
And that's how conscious polarity practice works. It's like, what do I desire to feel in my intimate relationship? And is my energetic expression, transmission, embodiment a match for that? And sometimes we have to get really real with ourselves and honest. And if the answer is no, we have to willingly, not have to, but it's a choice to say, okay, I'm willing to artfully navigate how I'm energetically expressing in the world, in those moments where I want deep intimacy. When you're at work, when you're kicking ass, when you want to be in that masculine, go for it. But when you want to attract a man or to attract the spine from your man or his depth, like that's the moment to surrender some of that stuff, some of your spine, so that he can step into that and hold you.
Yeah. There is a manifestation practice that is the most powerful way to create the life of your dreams. And it also happens to train your body in how to have full body orgasmic experiences. This is called Sex Magic, and I have a free training for you. It's an audio download and a guided step-by-step PDF that will show you exactly how to do this practice. Everything from how to create your manifestation, to how to do the pleasure circuits properly, to how to do the manifestation in such a way that you heal your nervous system and realign your destiny so that your unconscious can say yes to what you truly and most deeply want. To get this, head on over to laylamartin.com/sex magic. That's laylamartin.com/sex magic. I think another nuance I'd like to really talk about too is that and live your perspective on this. Like, I feel that it's very confused right now out in like, say, our world, like the conscious sex, love, and relationship realm, which is calling certain states masculine or telling women they're unattractive in certain states. And I think one of the things that I see gets confused, and I'm worried that women are hurting themselves, is that I have never seen that men find it unattractive when women can be successful and powerful. I really actually see that the most powerful, successful men choose women who have dharma, who are called to do something, whether that's raise children, whether that's build a farm, whether that's make money, whether that's be on stage, like, because that is actual life force energy running through you, which is feminine. And sometimes I think we tend to think of, oh, if you're doing something, that must be masculine.
Right.
But you can follow your dharma, your calling in this lifetime in a deeply feminine way.
Totally.
And what I find that men are unattracted to is when your heart is shut down and you're in your head and they can't feel you, they can't reach you. And your go, go, go is very like, I've been on the screen all day, I'm on spreadsheets, and I don't switch out of that. And I'm hurt and I'm blocking my heart. So now I'm like defensive and like a little bit aggressive, right? But I think what gets missed is when life force energy flows through the feminine, some women are like pearls. Some women are like this like radiant ocean of like stillness and softness. And other women are like firecrackers with life force energy flowing through them. And that men are attracted to different flavors of life force energy.
That's so true.
And I see women trying to control their flavor, like, oh, men couldn't be attracted to this flavor. Or it's like, no, men are attracted to you, life force flowing through you,
Your
whatever that looks like.
communion with that is what is essential, and that you're trusting that and living that. And that could show up differently for anyone. Like for some women, that might show up being a trad wife, living at home, raising farm animals and milking cows and whatever. And for some women, that might be being really creative out in the world and teaching and leading, right? But it really is the energy at which we're allowing that life force to move through us that feels feminine. Like, right? It's like I'm in the flow rather than I'm directing the flow and I'm like controlling the flow. I am the flow. I'm letting it live through me.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how do you make art out of a moment when you feel like your man is being a dick? It's a multiple choice
There's
question.
different versions of dick energy
Yes.
that I can respond to.
Okay, so yes, let me rephrase because you are correct that a cock is a holy gift. So if he's giving you his dick energy, that is a high blessing. How do you make art when, let's say, your man is in a space that like he's angry or he's triggered, like he's not in his presence.
Okay.
Right. And he's not, let's say, like, we're not talking abuse here, but he's just not being kind in that moment. Like,
sure.
how do you make art of that?
That's a great question. The first thing is to be in my own practice, to not let his collapse or his trigger my collapse and my trigger.
Yeah.
And to kind of tease apart those two things, right? That kind of codependent dynamic that could happen. Where like, you're triggered, now I'm triggered. So taking that step back, removing myself a little bit energetically from his reaction and sourcing myself in my own fullness. Like, okay, whatever he's experiencing right now doesn't necessarily have to do with me. Let me come back to myself. That's the first practice I would suggest for everyone. And it's probably the hardest part of the practice because sometimes when our partner's in a trigger, can trigger our deepest stuff, right? And it's really where the alchemy of relationship comes into play and where our practice really matters is to take that moment to not take it personally, right? And then there's a way, once I gain that awareness in the moment and I'm not in that looping cycle of reactivity and codependency, then I can make art. Then the art happens. I'm like, okay, how can I gift my partner? He's collapsed or on the bottom of the seesaw and I'm on the top right now. So how can I lift him up? What can I do to help him remember who he is, help him come back to his own depth of awareness? And sometimes that can be something really loving and sweet and tender. It can be something playful and humorous. It can be naming that trigger, that wound that's surfacing and just kind of pointing it out in a non-condescending way, like, oh, hey, Joe is here. I can feel. And that could be enough for him to just be like, oh, you're right. Oh, okay, I was lost for a second and now I'm back.
Yeah.
And that's the moment where you're both really meeting each other. That's where I encourage polarity practice to stem from. A lot of people try to do polarity in a collapsed state, right? And then it turns into this toxic dynamic, right? Where you're trying to please your man and surrender to his like unconscious, reactive, controlling state. And that's where I see a lot of conflation happen in the polarity world is people are calling that polarity and then they're saying, well, that's not healthy. And they're right. It's not.
Totally. I think that is, in my own experience, one of the most fundamentally misunderstood aspects of polarity.
Yes.
Because, when I was 21, 22, someone handed me The Way of the Superior Man. And like, in reading that, I was like, what an amazing vision of masculinity and manhood. And then I probably spent, 6 to 7 years feeling like if he was triggered, then he had stopped being in his power.
Yeah.
And that justified me then being in my trigger because he was no longer a man. And now I was in my feminine, AKA not my actual integrated feminine, but now just my wounded, hurt inner child. And then I would feel this entitlement of like, well, you're the man, so you should show up for my inner child trauma. And then that would spiral, right? And so I used it as a justification to emasculate or control. And I should say that, we're talking about polarity, which tends to talk a lot about masculine and feminine dynamics. And this is applicable to all relationships and queer relationships and all like same-sex relationships. Like this dynamic is extraordinarily human. And I feel like that's where I fell down. And for a long time, I associated my most wounded parts with my feminine expression and was like, oh, like a real man would be able to hold this. And we're talking like vintage, like, 26-year-old Layla or whatever. And I hurt my partners
Yeah,
in doing that. And so I do think that that core misunderstanding I know for sure it made me very skeptical of polarity work.
totally.
And I've seen that happen to a lot of people.
It does.
And I think one of the things that you just articulated is so important, which is polarity work or not polarity work. When my partner's triggered or when the world is triggered, like, how do I be in full self responsibility
Hmm.
to not follow the world or my partner down that rabbit
Yeah.
hole?
Hmm.
Because that is where you make art. Art comes from play, art comes from
Exactly.
creativity, which is only out of the trigger. And so
Hmm.
it's a
Hmm.
very like deep space of how do I stay in a place where I can play with the world?
Yeah.
And that's so special.
Mm. Yeah. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
It's really about having compassion for your partner, right? Blame, shoulds are killers of intimacy.
Yeah.
Having that. And a lot of people do get into polarity work. I'll see couples get into it together and then there'll be this expectation and this demand put on their partner, like, you're not feminine enough right now, or you're not masculine. That makes people super duper resentful, rightfully
Yeah.
so, right? So having compassion for our partner's wounds and their triggers is relationship. We have to be able to do that because we're human. No one's perfect. So you can't get mad at your partner for not showing up a certain way. You can love them there and love them through it and invite them, right? And if they can't get out of it, no matter how much love and how much presence and compassion you're giving, that's a different conversation. But therapy and getting help out of the relationship is definitely important as well.
And what do you say to couples who get into loops of criticism? Because you had a
Mm,
really beautiful Instagram post that was a lot about like criticism contracts us and like the
yeah.
best sex does not come from a contracted state.
Yeah. Mhm.
So, how do you help people get out of that habitual impulse to criticize their partner?
Yeah, that post in specific was directed towards women in their relationship with men because it is a common thing that I see where women start nitpicking,
Mm,
nitpicking their man. You're not
mm,
doing enough of this, or I need more of this and this and this. And what it does to our bodies when we're not holding our man in the highest reverence and really respecting his path and letting him and move in his own way in his own journey is it contracts our own eros and our sexuality and heart flow towards him,
mm,
right? So the greatest gift we can give to ourselves and to him is to find what we do respect and appreciate
mm,
about our partner and to live from that place. So if your pattern is to go to criticism first, and if you live in constant nitpicking and finding everything that's wrong with your partner, and this goes for anyone, my invitation would be to find the thing you appreciate
mm,
and start to I'm thinking like blowing like the fire so it like gets bigger, right? It's like you're giving your love to that part. And we people thrive in appreciation. All
mm,
humans do, right? We start to shut down when we're constantly being berated for the things that our partner doesn't like about us because they're often the same things we don't like about ourselves. And that's not a place where intimacy thrives.
mm. Yeah. And there's something to it's like I would want my partner to trust me in finding my way as a queen, in finding my way. Like he can't tell me how to be a queen,
Mm-hmm.
but somehow women feel very much like I'm going to tell you how to be a king.
Yeah.
And I think that's very different than giving your partner a loving piece of truth from your heart if something isn't
Mm-hmm.
working for you. That's very, very different than criticizing.
Yeah. And criticism is different than guidance and direction,
Mm,
right? So if I'm living in my feminine flow and just fully tuned into the current of energy in my life, I appreciate my partner's suggestions and guidance and even boundaries and even knows like that's not, I don't feel like that's the right thing to do because it creates more of that containment for my energy to surrender more
mm,
into, and it creates that sense of trust when that guidance is in attunement
mm,
to my heart and
mm,
to the greater uh, pulse of love in our relationship.
mm, mm.
Yeah.
If you want the most outrageously orgasmic pussy, if you want to have the most exquisite and luscious sexual experiences of your entire life, the most effective tool for this is called the crystal egg. This is a crystal that you pop up your pussy, and essentially you do a type of yoga with it, meaning you learn different breathwork practices, different strength building exercises, and different ways to use your sexual energy that enhance sensitivity, pleasure, and your sexual magnetism. This is my absolute favorite practice. It transformed my sexuality, and I'm so excited to share it with you. I teach it in a program called Crystal Pleasure. This is a 6-week-long training that gives you everything you need to know about this amazing tool so that you can have the most exquisite sexual experiences. You can sign up for this program by heading over to laylamartin.com/crystal pleasure. So I'd love to take this into sex and orgasm.
Okay.
Right? So we talked about being the expression of femininity, the expression of surrender. And I think of kind of the opposite of that as like a body posture, as like this, right? And one of the things that I have so much compassion for is like, if we grow up in a planet that is unsafe and sexually violent towards us and get exposed to people who are not kind, right? It's very natural for the body to do this. And I see so many women be so hard on themselves because their body is doing this. And so part of the process, right, of actually feeling feminine and surrendering, especially sexually, but at any point, is somatic, right? Because your body, I have yet to come across a woman who didn't have some blockage in her body to the flow of the feminine or to the trust of the universe. And so when we talk about feminine and surrender, and especially when we bring it into sex, it's like, I also want to just talk about where most of us are starting from.
Yeah, a lot of tension.
And how does it look? Like, how do you take someone who's showing up with that level of tension and invite them to feel feminine during sex and to surrender during sex?
Well, I would definitely encourage a solo practice first, right? Because it becomes harder when we have attention on us, right? So practicing on your own, if you're finding it difficult to orgasm because you're carrying so much tension and you're in your head and have a lot of anxiety, find making space every day just for 10 minutes to practice coming into your body, to practice softening the front surface of your body without the agenda to orgasm, because we can't really orgasm as fully as we're capable when we have that agenda, right? So it really comes from surrender. So definitely create a practice every day where you are softening that tension for yourself. And then it will be much easier to show up to your intimate dynamic and to a sexual moment with your partner because you'll have that reference point in your body. And now there's a tension on you. So that might bring up a whole nother layer of tension. And that is something I see all the time when I put people across from each other and have them practice polarity, right? Where there's a witness to hold the energetic expression of the woman. And I invite the woman to start moving that energy through her body, and she's frozen. She gets frozen when there's a witness on her, right? So that might take some time to start to unwind the tension that arises when there's a witness because we feel unsafe. We feel like, I'm going to be judged, right? So learning how to receive nourishment in being witnessed, right? And like letting your pleasure come from the witness. For me, it's very orgasmic, right? Because there's our own self practice, but then there's like, oh, wow, when I'm witness, when you notice how my breath is moving or how my breasts are breathing. And, it's like that. There's an eroticism in that we could surrender into and start opening into. And there's certainly a way that your partner can support that process as well.
How could a partner be more supportive in that?
Yeah, well, really being present, right? Like your presence, if you're playing in that masculine pole, really is the gift that allows your partner to open sexually, right? Really, really presencing her, witnessing her, meeting her breath, meeting her experience without judgment, without trying to change anything. Like that feels so safe, right? And it might take time for a woman to experience that as safe, right? Like it might take a year of this practice for her to start recognizing that your presence is safe, right? That's a big journey for women. Like no matter how much presence you're giving as a man, like if your woman has a armor around receiving it, right, then it will take time for her to start to open to that. But yeah, your undistracted presence is the greatest gift to your woman's orgasmic experience.
And for the men listening, I know one very common question is, what is it to be present sexually?
Yeah. hmm Well, sexually, of course, there's a way to be present non-sexually,
Thank
right?
God.
I can kind of disconnect from my body and just be like, I'm here, I'm present, I'm witnessing you, right? But that's not what we want to feel when we're having sex. We want to feel that presence incarnated through the cock, through the breath, through this body, right? So often when a man gets erect and he starts to become aroused, he loses presence. Like he just becomes so hyper focused on ejaculation that he just loses it, right? And that creates a level of mistrust in a woman. She's like, well, now you're just trying to like get off and I can't feel you here with me anymore. So drawing your awareness back, resting, taking a deep breath, feeling your feet on the ground, letting yourself feel erect while also feeling her heart, being aware of like her breath and every nuance of her body. It's like you're enveloping your awareness around the entire experience, including your own and including hers. And that's not an easy practice, but that's where I would suggest someone to start.
Yeah, it's like shifting out of the goal, because anytime you're in
Absolutely.
goal orientation, you're not here.
Yeah.
You're thinking about the thing that could be happening.
hmm
And I think a lot of people, right, don't fully understand what that feels like when you're in a sexual experience and you're like as vulnerable as you get, right? You're like naked, like there's an exchange of fluids, like whether this was your long-term partner, whether it's someone you just met, right, that you're exploring with, there's such a vulnerability in sexuality. And if the person you're with is like in the I'm going to ejaculate, or I want to try this hot thing, or wherever you go in your head, it's such a jarring experience, because it's like when you're trying to have an intimate conversation with someone and they're like somewhere else, they're thinking about something else. They're thinking about what they're going to do at work tomorrow. They're thinking about their to-do list. You're like, this person isn't here with me. And then it's compounded by the fact that this person isn't here with me and we're both naked. So it sounds so simple, but I don't think sometimes people realize what a jarring experience that is. And we get so used to not being present with each other sexually. We get so used to fantasizing, or I'm thinking about the goal, or I'm trying to get off, that we've forgotten what that is to like actually be there with each other.
Yeah. And the urge to ejaculate is very, very, very primal and not easy to work with, right? It's like when that takes over, it's like that becomes a thing. So it really is a practice to learn how to remain present and not lose yourself completely in that urge.
It's like a billion years of,
Exactly.
I think, evolution from like the first single cell. I might be getting, I think that's the correct math. I'm not 100% sure. Right? Like impulsing to be like procreate, pass on DNA.
As quick as possible, right?
Yeah. And then sometimes you're like, oh man, like maybe a long time ago I felt this way. Now I just feel tremendous like support for my partner. I mean, he's incredible with non-ejaculation, but when it's hard, it's like, it's literally billions of years of your body being like, pass on the seed, you know?
It's a super hard practice. So if you are even trying, bravo.
This is Sex Magic, and it's designed to basically make your body feel more glittery, more turned on. It's got all kinds of amazing herbs in it. It's sweetened with monk fruit. It's colored with blueberries.
It smells so good.
Yeah. So yeah, it's got this beautiful combination of saffron in it and shilajit and all kinds of activating things, dopaminergics that make your body feel more pleasure. It's really powerful. Yeah.
Cheers.
Oh, and Hooperzine A, which is an aphrodisiac moss.
Cool.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers. Wow. So good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was like the thing we were the most proud of. We were like, we put so many herbs in it and it actually tastes
It's amazing.
good.
It's like kind of fizzy.
Yeah. Well, that's the sparkling water. So my favorite is with sparkling water, but it's harder to do it with sparkling water because it like fizzes over. It's more commitment, but I think it tastes better.
So good.
So if I'm a woman listening to this and I'm like, shit, like I would love this kind of partnership that you're talking about,
Mm,
but I'm trapped in a cycle of unavailable
mm,
or not present with me, not choosing me.
mhm.
What do you say to someone who feels like they're in a cycle of creating the same kind of letdown as they're searching for
Mm,
partnership?
mhm. The practice, I would say, always starts with yourself, right? So, daily practice is essential in my work, right? So, creating a daily relationship with your deep current of love, right? And letting that live through your body without a man, like whether or not you have a man, like how can I become so full in myself, so trusting in myself, so that my discernment becomes sharper and clearer about who I let into this preciousness that is my body and my experience, right? So we need to come into that relationship with ourselves in order to start creating the relationships that we really desire. And that's definitely the first place to start.
Mm. And it is possible, yeah, to
Yes.
overcome like a feeling of I'm not worthy or there's nobody out there or I'm unlovable, so I have to settle.
Yeah.
Like, I think if you haven't done the embodied practices, it feels like how could
Yeah.
like a little bit of dancing in my underwear fix it all?
Yeah, totally. And therapy might need to be a part of that as well, right?
Mhm.
So that's not my focus, but usually they're tandem, right? Because some shame and some unworthiness, there's deeper traumas and wounds associated with that experience that can't be addressed through just feeling love and channeling love through your body, right? So we need to do that work often in tandem. And hang out with other women who embody that kind of lusciousness that you crave, right?
Mm.
We need to support each other in deepening in that experience. And it's hard to do it on our own sometimes. So if you know a woman who has a lot of trust in her body and is really luscious and full, like sometimes I even encourage women because we receive transmissions from people, right? It's like
Mm.
we can feel into a woman's body, a woman who we sense has a lot of trust and fullness and wholeness in herself, and just start to like feel what it would be like to be in her body. How does she breathe? How does
Mm.
she hold her spine? Um, like where's her center of gravity? And just start exploring how that would feel in your body as a reference point. That could be a good place to start.
Yeah. And for me, when I went through a period where I was like, I want to change my worthiness in
Mhm,
relationship. And it was a very specific thing for me. Like I felt
mhm,
worthy of so many things in life and I felt really
mm,
healed in my sexuality, but I knew that I did not feel worthy in relational love and that I still had a lot of guarding around my heart.
mhm.
And it really was every day I did my altar practices and my prayers. And I had a gold stripper pole behind my altar. And I would put on 6-inch heels and wear my underwear, sometimes be naked, and dance to 3 songs
Mm,
and choose worthiness in my body.
mhm,
And I would let myself grieve or I would let myself
mhm,
do sex magic to both clear out energy and rebuild energy and build
mhm,
the dream of what I really wanted.
mhm,
And those practices work. It's just when
mhm,
people haven't done them, it's
mhm,
sort of like if it was 100 years ago and you were American and you were trying to be like, look, you can do this thing where you move your body and you breathe in certain ways and then you chant in Sanskrit and it'll bring you like a deep inner peace. People be like, what the fuck? Like, what are you talking about? And you're like, no, it's yoga, right? And once you've done yoga, you start getting it. You're like, oh, wow, there is this practice that can connect me to the divine, that can bring peace in my nervous system. We just are so unfamiliar
Yeah.
with the sexual somatic practices. But
Mhm.
it's like, no, there are these practices that
Yeah.
actually literally unbarricade your heart
Yeah.
and train you to open your body and allow you to feel the unfelt hurts so
Mm.
that you can let life
Mhm.
flow through you.
Yeah. And longing is a big part of that experience. And so I'm not encouraging women to not need a partner, right? Like that longing for partnership, that longing for union is so beautiful.
Mm,
And don't let it collapse you, right?
mm,
That's often what happens. We feel this longing and then we collapse into neediness and fear and grasping, trying to get that need met, right? And it becomes this desperation that ultimately leaves us feeling very depleted.
mm,
So, a practice I often guide women in is how can we experience that ache of our longing as the fullness of life itself moving through us, and just commune with that longing and let it be, let it nourish us, let it enliven us, so we can simultaneously have our heart wide open. Like, I long for love, and this longing is so full, I actually don't need anything at all. It's this crazy paradox, but
Yeah.
that in itself is what attracts the partner you want. Like, uh, a man would find that so beautiful, to feel your open, longing heart and to feel like, I don't need you, but I want you, right? That is so attractive and so magnetic. Your longing is magnetic. So don't shut that down and don't collapse in it.
Mm, mm. And then if you've been in a long-term marriage or partnership and you're like, polarity, what is like, I'd be happy if we just had sex every once in a while. Like, how can you cultivate polarity in a relationship where it's like you've gotten into some other pattern altogether?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, often what happens in marriage is we're doing a lot of sameness, we're sharing a lot of practical, things like home and kids and bills, and that decreases polarity over the long term. And we start to resent our partner and we start to just become best friends. This is one circumstance. There's obviously many. But in that circumstance, it's first really important for each partner to identify what it is they really want to feel from each other.
Yeah.
What would be the most nourishing gift that I could receive when I come home from work for the day or when we're alone together? What is the one thing that I am craving most to feel from my partner or just anyone, right? It's like, what do I want in intimacy? And to get really clear with that in ourselves, to communicate that in relationship, of course, like let your partner know what you want. And so that's like what they can do, but then we have to do our own practice to become a match for what we desire, to invoke what we desire. Like, if you are craving to be penetrated by your partner's presence, what kind of energy are you bringing that inspires that? Like, what kind of energy are you living in your body that would make your partner want to be present with you or not, right? So a lot of women are in resentment or hard or resistance and shutting down, and at the same time wanting presence, but that energy is not inviting. I don't want to be present with someone who's just nagging at me and bitching at me all day or resenting me, right? So taking that reality check with ourselves and being willing to do that practice of being an invitation, both partners, for the thing that we crave, right? If you're a man and you are craving your partner's devotion and surrender, it's like, how are you showing up in the relationship to inspire that? Are you, just wafting in the wind and, like not really standing up in your integrity and being true to your word? Because all of those things, if you learn to step into them, will absolutely inspire her devotion. Like, women become devoted to men who have integrity and carry themselves boldly in the world, right? And with love and yeah, just a strong spine. So that would be definitely the place to start.
If you wanted to learn sacred sexuality with your partner and deep dive into the most exquisite intimacy, I created the Tantric Mastermind with my beloved Dr. Babak Amen to be able to take you on the journey of a lifetime. This program includes 2 live retreats, one in a castle in England, one in the magical deserts of Sedona, so that you can learn sexual mastery and the art of the deepest intimacy and fall in love in the most magical ways together in these incredible locations. It's meant to be the education of a lifetime, but also the romantic adventure of a lifetime. If you're curious to learn more, head on over to laylamartin.com/tantric mastermind. So I loved a post that you made about submission, right? And submission, I kind of referenced this earlier, is different from surrender. Surrender is this state of I trust and will open into my body, the moment, what's happening, right? And I will also like follow the thread of life. Submission to me is very much, I'm going to do what you say. And submission can be something that is unwanted and forced and something that you're trying to break out of.
Right.
And submission can be something that you play with because it's super hot and super sexy. And I was at this retreat I was doing in New York, upstate, and someone came up to me during lunch and she was like, Layla, you're the person who asked this of, like, why would any woman ever want to be choked during sex ever? And I was like, great, let's talk about this. And to me, what I said, and you had such a beautiful perspective on this as well, was like a form of physical submission in my body feels so erotic because it allows me to feel that kind of like warrior power of my beloved. And when I feel his presence so strong, my body goes into that like, oh, take me. Like, and I think one of the sexiest, most erotic feelings is like, do whatever you want to me,
Oh my God, yes.
but you feel it, right? I think that's been used against women. And we've seen it so often of like, I'm going to do the strangest, craziest shit to you because that gets me off. So a lot of women are like, oh no. It's like that state of the feminine got really co-opted and abused in all of the trauma that's happened for thousands of years now on the planet. But that state of like, I am so turned on by you and I trust your presence and your power so much that like, I want to do the craziest, nastiest shit with you. Like, oh my God, yes, right? So to me, that's where that submission is like a turn on. It's like a, wow, I'm so turned on by this.
Yeah.
It can also be really hot to not make any decisions, to just be like, I'm just doing whatever you say.
Yeah.
That can be super erotic. And I think something that our culture has trouble with in nuance is you can find something so hot in the bedroom and not want to be treated that way at the grocery store. It's like, just because I like submission with like my chosen hot beloved does not mean that like I'm here to feel submissive to like every man on the planet, because I'm not, kind of feeling. So I think there's all of that. But the thing that has meant so much to me that I articulated to this woman is that when a man has to do that, because it's like the only thing that turns him on, or because he needs the feminine to feel small.
Right.
I find that such a turnoff.
Right.
And I think that's why a lot of women are turned off by like, oh, this guy saw this on porn and now he's trying it on me.
Yeah.
Versus what I loved you say was like, if a man loves you in your submission or wants your submission, he should also want your power. Or else what are you doing with him?
Right. Yeah, totally. So there's a difference between active submission and passive submission, right? Like passive submission is, okay, do whatever you want to me. It's like we cut off from our discernment. We cut off from our trust, and we just allow something to happen. Like whatever our man wants, even if he's, being too aggressive or in a controlling mode or like in that kind of agenda, we need to allow it anyways. That's obviously not empowering or what I teach or what I encourage, right? Active submission is evoked. It's like we're submitting because the gravity of our partner's presence is so powerful and so trustable and so an integrity that we want to. It feels amazing to submit to that. But as soon as we feel him distracted or going into control, show that. Show like, I can't open to this right now, or this doesn't feel safe, or like just show your authentic bodily response. It's not like you're just this like limp doormat just letting whatever happen. Your body is responding to the level of presence that you're receiving, the amount of trust you feel in your body. And he's really following you, right?
So I would love then if you could share one take-home practice for someone who's single right now, but who would want to open more into that state of flow and femininity, and then a practice for a couple that wants to build the polarity in their relationship.
Yeah, sure. So if you are a single woman, especially if you have a job where you're in your masculine and you work all day and you're kind of in your mind and your body gets tense, a simple, beautiful practice you can do is to get home and just dance. Like just dance, let it go, shake your body, move your hips, and connect with your pleasures. A daily practice. So simple, but just set a timer, put on a song you love, and do it. Just do it. Simple as that. And if you're in a relationship, like I mentioned earlier, I think taking that time to really check in with each other about, what do you want to feel from me? Like if you walked into the house, what would just light you up so much? Like what kind of energy, what kind of presence would be the one thing that would light you up and nourish you so much? And you each ask each other what that is. And then for a week straight, for 5 minutes a day, just give that thing to your partner and notice how it shifts the relationship.
Beautiful.
Mhm.
And where can people stay connected to you and learn from you the best?
So you can visit my website, wayofdevotion.com, or Way of Devotion on Instagram.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being
Yeah,
here.
thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this Tantric Life. I am Layla Martin. This is the home for the realest conversations about sex, spirituality, polarity, conscious relationships, and all kinds of topics that help us live the absolute most incredible lives. Please check out the next episode. Please go ahead and leave your rating and review on Spotify or Apple or YouTube. It's so helpful when you do that. If you want to stay connected to me, the most helpful supportive thing you can do is to head over to laylamartin.com, sign up with your email address. That connects you to me if you want to study deeper with me, if you want to receive my deeper teachings. I do it predominantly via email. Finally, you can check me out on Instagram at @the Layla Martin. And thank you so much for being here.